Thank you, Stephen. The media played a large role in the narrative of Penn State, and they set a lot of mindsets. And to talk about that is the creator of frameandpaterno.com, John Ziegler.
Thank you, Franco. How about Franco's choice of locations for upon further review? Yeah? Not a bad choice in January. I agree with much of what Stephen had to say, although I'll say it much more quickly, and that is that, as I said when I went on Piers Morgan on CNN, which was quite an experience, the Penn State Board of Trustees wet themselves. That's the clearest, most concise way to describe what happened here. Now, why did they wet themselves? The fuel that created that set of circumstances was a media firestorm, the likes of which we've never seen before, and which I've studied now for over 2 years. I'm going to go through how and why that, what I call media malpractice, occurred in an unprecedented way in this case and allowed a myth to be created which destroyed unfairly Joe Paterno and Penn State University. Let's go back to November 5th of 2011. This was the day that, for all intents and purposes, it was a Saturday. The story broke. The grand jury presentment was mysteriously leaked online. Gee, I wonder how that happened. And the first story about Joe Paterno in the Sandusky indictments was by a woman by the name of Sarah Gannon. Many of you have probably heard of her. She plays an incredibly key role in this fiasco. And she wrote that Joe Paterno was being praised for his handling of sex abuse suspicions involving Jerry Sandusky. And in that article, there is a very clear source. It's from the Attorney General's office. I believe it was Janelle Eschbach, who was the person who questioned Joe Paterno and many others in that grand jury. And it's very clear that the prosecution is trying to send a message that their key witness, Joe Paterno, did the right thing, and that he is the reason why they believe Mike McQueary. Because without Joe Paterno, Mike McQueary is out on an island all by himself, and he's not going to be believed. Joe Paterno is key to the prosecution case. Now, that story held for about 2 days. It was a weekend. ESPN was covering actual football games. And then on Monday, now see, to me, the smoking gun of how the media blew it here is that on Monday, Sports Illustrated goes to bed each week. In extreme circumstances like the Boston bombing massacre or a national championship game on a Monday, they can delay that till Monday night. But in general, they go to bed for their edition on Monday afternoon. In that first edition of Sports Illustrated, after the story broke on that Saturday, there was not one news article in Sports Illustrated about the Jerry Sandusky scandal. Not one. There was an article on the back page, an op-ed piece about Sandusky, which read as if the writer thought they were going to have no other opportunity to ever write about Jerry Sandusky again because this was going to be a non-story. The reality is that until Joe Paterno's name was attached to this, and the media thought that they had an opportunity to create this incredible Greek tragedy, that no one cared about this story. The media did not care about this story. But something changed on Monday afternoon. On Monday afternoon, after Sports Illustrated had gone to bed for the week, there was a press conference with the Attorney General and the Police Commissioner. The Attorney General made some really quizzical comments regarding how it was that Central Mountain High School had handled the situation so incredibly well involving victim number one, Aaron Fisher, when in fact, we now know that that's not the case at all. That Central Mountain High School didn't even believe Aaron Fisher at first. But she did that very specifically to try to create a disparity between the way the high school handled the situation and the way Penn State allegedly handled the situation. Then the police commissioner was asked an extraordinarily leading question in front of a room full of media hungry for a good story. He was asked, did Joe Paterno fulfill his moral obligation? Now, I don't believe in conspiracies. I'm an anti-conspiracy person in almost every way because I think human beings are far too stupid to be able to pull off conspiracies, especially government people. So I believe Yeah, you go ahead and go ahead and applaud the stupidity of government people. I believe that he simply wanted to please the media in front of him. What's he supposed to say at that point? That there was no moral responsibility to somehow do more to stop Jerry Sandusky? That wouldn't have fit their narrative. So I don't actually believe, although there are those who disagree with me, including, I believe, Trustee Lebrano, who believe that that was done on purpose because the governor did not like the way the media narrative was going the first 2 or 2.5 days of the story. That's possible. I don't think it's necessary to understand what really transpired here. But then, after that, and I believe this is the most underrated element of this entire case, or at least in that first couple of days, there was an article by Sarah Gannon, which I thought we're going to see up on the screen, but apparently we do not. So the headline of that article is "Mothers of 2 of Jerry Sandusky's alleged victims lash out at Penn State officials' handling of scandal." Now, this occurred on late Monday afternoon, late night into Monday. This was an incredibly key moment in the media narrative because up until that point, there had been no direct connection to Penn State and Joe Paterno. Still not up there. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. That's the article from Sarah Gannon. Now, this is an incredibly key moment in the scandal because at this point, ESPN looks around and they say, well, here we go. We got this Sandusky thing going on, and we got a lousy Monday Night Football game, and NBA's on strike. Hockey just started. No one cares. Football's in a lull. Baseball just ended. NCAA basketball hasn't started yet. We got a slow week ahead of ourselves. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Let's take a look at what's going on here at Penn State. Maybe, is there a Joe Paterno connection to this whole story? So they all descend on State College for Joe Paterno's scheduled press conference for that Tuesday. And what do they see in the paper that morning? They see this. And I've watched way more ESPN DVDs of that week than any human being should ever possibly be forced to do. And I can tell you that they repeated this story literally dozens and dozens of times. Sarah Gannon went on every single news outlet that day to discuss this story. Now, I myself, at the time, bought into this notion. So, because if you're thinking about this, well, there had to be somebody in the wilderness, right, who knew that Jerry Sandusky was this hideous monster, who knew all along, was screaming, my God, why isn't anyone doing anything? And so Sarah Gannon put the mothers, the ultimate moral authorities, the mothers of the victims, here they are, ladies and gentlemen, the people who are blaming Penn State, the ones who are trying to protect their precious children, right? Well, the story was balderdash. Because first of all, the 2 moms here, victim of number 1, never even mentions Penn State in the story. She mentions, in fact, later, Aaron Fisher, victim number 1, would be asked during his book tour, do you blame Penn State? He said no. They held a protest at his high school, Central Mountain High School. He had nothing to do with Penn State. But this mother was lumped in with the mother of victim 6, the 1998 victim. That's an incredibly key moment in this whole situation because the mom of victim 6 is used by Sarah Gannon in this article to create this false narrative. And she's saying all sorts of things which make you think, my goodness gracious, how could this have happened? She knew her son was being abused all these years from 1998, and Penn State and Joe Paterno did nothing, right? That's outrageous. It's baloney. And you know how we know it's baloney? Because we now know, first of all, that the 1998 victim has never made any allegation of a sexual assault of any sort. That's why there were no charges in 1998. That the 1998 victim never thought of Jerry as a pedophile until after the investigation began in 2009 or 10, and he was informed of it. In fact, in 2009 and 10, he was still texting Jerry with Father's Day texts, and I believe it was also some other holiday. I think it was Thanksgiving. Thank you, Jerry, for all you do for me. This was 10 and 11 years after the fact. a relationship he maintained with the knowledge and approval of the very mother that Sarah Gannon was using to try to make this a Joe Paterno and Penn State story. It was baloney. She had no right to be making this claim. And you know what's further proof of the fact that she had no right to make this claim? Very interestingly, she sent not one, but two of her daughters. This is the mom of victim 6, the woman that Sarah Gannon used that first week to try to destroy Penn State and Joe Paterno. This is her and her daughter, one of her daughters who went to Penn State well after the alleged allegation. This was from December of last year, the graduation of the sister of victim 6, the 1998 victim. Not only does she send them there, but as you can see from the photograph, they're quite proud of "We Are Penn State." The reality is, this is the woman that Sarah Gannon used in that critical first couple of days of the scandal to try to destroy Penn State and Joe Paterno, using her, who, by the way, victim number 6 has not yet settled the case against Penn State, is going to court because they think this is going to be big money for them. And I hope they go all the way to court with this. I doubt Penn State will have the balls to do that. But if they did, we would see that victim 6 has no claim against anybody here. And that the mom has no claim against anybody here. But that didn't stop Sarah Gannon. And by the way, how is it that Sarah Gannon had the phone number or the contact information for the mother of a victim of a secret grand jury investigation 2 days after the presentment comes out? The reason she had that information was that she was a vehicle. She was an operational arm of the prosecution during the grand jury. And how do we know that? That's not John Ziegler telling you that. That's the prosecution in the Sandusky case. They were forced to, in court, stipulate, which means there was no argument. They stipulated in court that Sarah Gannon had contacted this woman, the mom of victim 6, the 1998 victim, and had said to her, "We need you to find more victims or the case is going to die. I can put you in touch with an agent." And guess what happened? Many of the victims happened to be friends with victim number 6. I don't believe that that's a coincidence. The reality is, Sarah Gannon was an arm of the prosecution. And what happens to her? She gets rewarded with a Pulitzer Prize. Now, I actually contacted each member of the Pulitzer Prize jury who gave her the Pulitzer Prize, individually emailed them with specific links to the stipulation by the prosecution that I just referred to, and said, "Were you even aware of this when you gave her the Pulitzer Prize, that she was acting on behalf of the prosecution?" Not one member of that Pulitzer committee even got back to me. Not one. It's an absolute joke. Now, 1998 is incredibly key to this whole story. And in fact, interestingly, we are here at the site of the NCAA convention. And it is the sanctions that the NCAA brought against Penn State, which begin bizarrely with the 1998 episode. So this is key. Now, interestingly, Franco Harris and I and several other people here, Gary Werkheiser and Eric, and do we have anybody else from our crew here? Eric Vrosnick and a couple of other people went to go see Mark Emmert about a year ago in Los Angeles to see whether we could ask him a question. And Franco did ask a question. It was about 8.5 minutes long, and it was a fascinating question. And unfortunately, we were not able to get it on video because the NCAA took away all of our cameras. I mean, I almost felt like this was a Boardwalk Empire hit where all of our shooters were being taken down. But thankfully, we had Franco hooked up to a wireless mic, and we were able to have audio. Now, I'm actually a pretty open-minded guy. I like going where the evidence takes me. And I was open-minded that maybe Mark Emmert and the NCAA had some information we didn't have. Maybe they had some understanding we didn't have. even I was stunned at what a moron Mark Emmert is. I mean, I left that day. That day, I went in there 99.9% sure we were right. I left 110% sure we were right. Because his answer to Franco was so devoid of any understanding of the facts of this case. I believe, and by the way, many media members also to this day believe, in fact, Sports Illustrated, I corrected a Sports Illustrated columnist who wrote in Sports Illustrated that the 1998 victim had claimed he was raped. And I said, are you kidding me? That's not even close. He acknowledged I was right, but never corrected it. To this day, it still is on their website as if the 1998 victim had claimed he was raped, and Penn State knew about that. But when Mark Emmert was asked the 8.5-minute question by Franco Harris, in his response, he actually asked Franco, seriously and without irony, did you play on the 1998 team, Franco? Now, are you serious? I mean, come on. We all love Franco, but yeah. But Franco graduated in 1972. So Mark Emmert is only just a little bit out of touch. Now, so we go from the Sarah Gannon false narrative to what happens next. The press conference for Joe Paterno is canceled by John Surma, not by Graham Spanier. It was reported as if it was done by Graham Spanier, which is an incredibly key point because, again, the perception here is Penn State is throwing Joe Paterno under the bus, admitting his guilt, and now all, Katie bar the door. The floodgates are open. But that was false. The press conference was actually canceled as part of a coup d'etat by John Surma and the Surma family, who clearly had a vendetta against Joe Paterno, which Ray Blehar and others have documented extensively. But that got completely misperceived, as if Joe Paterno's press conference was being canceled by somebody at Penn State who was saying he's guilty and was credible in doing that. That was false. And I believe the biggest mistake that the Paterno forces made was not immediately having Joe Paterno do an interview from his home and being able to at least buy some time here. I'm not 100% sure why that didn't happen, but the reality is at that moment, it was over. At that moment, the media saw blood. At that moment, the media decided that they knew that Joe Paterno was going down. It was just a matter of time. And the media loves not just the downfall of a legend, but they love a story that's on a tight time frame. There was a Saturday home football game that week, which was critical because the board of trustees was terrified that this was going to turn into a pep rally on national TV for Joe Paterno. I believe if the indictments had come down the week later as they were previously scheduled, none of this happens because you don't have that pressure cooker of the game on that Saturday against Nebraska. So I believe that that was what was driving a lot of this, and the media knew at that point, okay, we have a beginning, a middle, and a quick end to this story. This is why they love trials. They love big city car chases. They get bored easily, the media. And so this is at this point, it was game, set, match. And unfortunately, the Board of Trustees caved and fired Joe Paterno in the worst way possible, which has been perceived wrongly as a guilty plea, and something our forces have been battling now for over 2 years. That then led, of course, to the Free Report. Now, the Free Report media coverage was absurd. You have a 267-page report released at 9 a.m., which most people couldn't even get access to, a press conference at 10 a.m., and he's never been asked or answered real questions since that day. And in my movie, The Framing of Joe Paterno, I show Jeremy Schaap from ESPN breathlessly reporting 7 minutes before the press conference on his BlackBerry. You actually see him on his BlackBerry reading this, I guess the synopsis of the Free Report, saying, remember that part where Paterno supporters said he didn't know about 1998 and that meant that the Sandusky resignation in 1999 had no connection? Well, that was a bunch of lies, according to the Free Report. I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost a direct quote. Well, we now know that's complete baloney. I believe the most important thing Free found was that there are notes from Joe Paterno before the 1998 investigation saying that Jerry is going to retire, discussing Jerry Sandusky's retirement. So it exonerates Joe Paterno from allegedly pulling some sort of a forced retirement. And by the way, in what world does a forced retirement make any damn sense when the allegation occurs in May of 1998, was found to be unfounded? There's no evidence that Joe Paterno knew any of the particulars of it. The law enforcement fully investigates. That's in May of 1998. You let him coach in 98, and you let him coach again in 99? How does that make any damn sense? But because the media is so moronic, they think 1998, 1999, boy, that's only 1 year difference. There must be a connection. Apparently, they are unaware that football season occurs in the fall and that the allegation was in the spring. The reality is it makes no damn sense, and it did not happen, and I'm positive of it, mainly because, for no other reason than I've had extensive discussions with Jerry about his almost accepting the University of Virginia's head coaching job in 2000. And if it hadn't been for the New York Jets losing their last 3 games of the season that year, and Al Groh, a Virginia alumnus, calling at the last second and saying, I want the job, Jerry Sandusky would have been the head coach at Virginia, because there were no whisper campaigns against Jerry Sandusky, because no one knew anything in 2000. And that's the reality of it. So we have the free report being accepted, of course, by the media, basically with pom-poms in hand. You know, go Louis. Go Louis, because this is what they needed. This is what they wanted. Penn State Board of Trustees, of course, caves, and now we have the narrative set in stone. And almost nothing can change it. In fact, not only do we not, nothing can change it. I mean, even Bob Costas, who admits he was wrong in jumping to conclusions because he was going to the London Olympic Games and hadn't read the full report and based it on other people's analysis, he admits that he was wrong to say that Joe Paterno was involved in a cover-up. He even went on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno and said this, and no one cared. That's how set in stone the narrative is. We're never going to get a Bob Costas on the Tonight Show, with Jay Leno, by the way, agreeing with him that Joe Paterno never was involved in a cover-up, and yet no one cared. And I've been in extensive communication with Bob Costas, and I can tell you, Bob Costas believes a lot more strongly in our side of this case than he's ever been willing to say so far. Hopefully, eventually, the situation will occur where he feels comfortable expressing his true opinions and feelings. But that's how toxic this case is, that even someone as powerful as Bob Costas feels as if they can't go any further than that. Now, not only do we have Bob Costas saying it, we have the prosecutor in the Sandusky case. Now, Ray, if you can, I lost the, All right, we have the prosecutor in the Sandusky case, Frank Fina, saying on CBS that he does not believe that Joe Paterno took part in a cover-up. Now, this is extraordinary. I want you to watch this. This is from the 60 Minutes version of the interview with Frank Fina, the Sandusky prosecutor, telling Armin Katayan that Joe Paterno was not involved in a cover-up. And unfortunately, much of this ends up on the editing room floor when it appears on the CBS Evening News. But here's the actual interview.
Months later. Fina believes finger-pointing over the icon's role or influence in an alleged cover-up is misplaced.
Do you believe that Coach Paterno was a part of the conspiracy to conceal, to cover up the crimes at Penn State by Jerry Sandusky?
I do not, and I'm viewing this strictly on the evidence, not any kind of fealty to anybody. I did not find that evidence. I always viewed Paterno as just one piece of this case, not the most important piece, not the center point of this. This isn't the Joe Paterno story. This is a story about Jerry Sandusky, Spanier, Schultz, and Curley.
But you know as well as I do, Frank, Joe Paterno was the most powerful man on that campus, arguably the most powerful coach in college football. He knew what was going on in that university, and the argument is if he knew what he knew, he should have put a stop to it. He should have done more.
Well, that's right. And I don't see any need to judge him beyond his own words. And I'm not defending him at all. I think the realistic view of him is that, first of all, he was one of the few people that did anything. He did come forward. He did report this to his supervisors, the head of the police department. And ultimately, he said it best. I didn't do enough. I should have done more.
All right, now, that is fascinating. I probably could talk for 3 hours just on that, but I won't. Here's the short version of what you just heard and saw. First of all, it's extraordinary that the Sandusky prosecutor says Joe Paterno was not involved in a cover-up, when the Free Report still claims that he was. The NCAA acted based upon the fact that he was, against his own self-interest. And, of course, most importantly, from our perspective, what does he leave out of Joe Paterno's infamous comment, now infamous, made by the movie? In hindsight. For some reason, the in hindsight part of this always gets left out. He also says, well, he's at least the only person who did something. Well, what was the something that he did? He did exactly what he was supposed to do. And if he had done anything else, there would have been hell to pay. As a matter of fact, I believe, having investigated this for over 2 years, having spoken to Sandusky, knowing more about Victim 2 than probably anybody else other than Jerry and maybe Dottie and Victim 2 himself, I believe that had Joe Paterno done what his critics now claim he should have done by going to the police or whatever, it would have been a clusterfuck of epic proportions. Epic proportions, because it would have blown up in his face. Because I don't believe there was an assault that night. I don't think there was anything close to an assault that night. Now, I've explained the details on that extensively at framingpaterno.com, and I hope you'll check that out. But I want to finish up on how this media narrative has created in cement now a myth that has destroyed the legacy of Joe Paterno and unfairly maligned Penn State University. By the way, for those of you who don't know, I did not go to Penn State. I went to Georgetown. Please don't hold that against me. So, also, by the way, don't hold against me that I once dated one of the key reporters in this case, Christine Brennan, who, unbelievably to me, and Christine and I very briefly dated, and if you've seen my wife walking around here, I made a great choice in not pursuing anything further with Christine. But the more important element of this is Christine and I still have communicated about this. Because, I mean, Christine actually took a lot of career advice from me. And it's amazing to me that she doesn't think, well, wait a minute, if John feels so strongly about this, maybe I'm wrong. But this is the arrogance of these people. But she has actually said to me, and you can see this at our website, framingpaterno.com, she said, John, I know I'm right about this, and this is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. I know I'm right about this because I've gotten so much positive feedback for my reporting on the story. Now think about that. Think about that. This is a Northwestern grad. By the way, in what world would a Northwestern grad whose father was such a big Michigan fan, she actually sprinkled his ashes on the old Michigan field? So in what world would that person be allowed to be the anti-Penn State person for USA Today? But that's, that just goes with this whole entire story. Unfortunately, this is the way the media works. They think if they're getting positive feedback, they must be right. And of course, since the entire media industrial complex believes it, they think we're all a bunch of nuts. So we're now in this weird world where the people who know the most about the case are deemed to be the least credible. And yet we've seen time and time again over the last 2 years other situations which prove that they're not to be trusted. Look what happened with Manti Te'o. They bought into a complete falsehood with Manti Te'o. Lance Armstrong, the media were the only people in the world who thought he wasn't on steroids of some sort. Yet they bought into that narrative, including, by the way, some of Paterno's most ardent critics were Lance Armstrong's biggest supporters. By the way, look at what happened with Jameis Winston and the media coverage of that. And by the way, if there are any Florida State fans out there watching streaming, look out, because based upon the Jerry Sandusky precedent, if Jameis Winston is ever convicted of a sex crime between now and 2027, your national championship is going to be vacated. It's over, based upon the Sandusky precedent. The reality is, whether you look at Aaron Hernandez's situation, based upon the precedent there, obviously the New England Patriots should have known. He may have killed 3 people now in 2 different episodes, but the media doesn't look at it that way. The reality is the media is broken. The media doesn't care about the facts. They don't care about details. They only care about themselves. They are narcissistic morons who are not to be trusted. They blew this case from day one, And it's why we are where we are. I'll close with this. Joe Paterno said he wanted the truth. I wish there were more people in this country who gave a damn about the truth, because they certainly don't exist in the news media. That's for damn sure. I don't even know how many people who are looking into this story really care about the truth, because everybody seems to have their own agenda. My agenda in this, against all odds, has been to find the truth. I believe we found it. People say all the time, go find the truth. I think we basically have it. Joe Paterno was not guilty in all of this. That's the truth. I'm glad you care about the truth. Thank you for your time. Never give up on this.